Hello, everyone. And I want to welcome our wonderful panel of people who agreed to be brave and be grilled by a New York Times journalist. Don't worry, I'll try to be polite. I thought we should first just start out, having everyone get to know you. So I just would love for each of you to introduce yourself, talk about your organization, and also just, quickly tell us, what is the most important element of progress in DEI over the last 3 years, which is, I know, hard to do briefly, but I know you're gonna try. Do you wanna start? We can start on this end with you, Nicole.
Okay, great. Is that on? Everyone can hear me? Well, hello, good afternoon. My name is Nicole Hughey, and I'm Senior Vice President, Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at SiriusXM. How many of you have SiriusXM or Pandora? Oh, I love it. I love you already. Thank you. You keep me employed, so thank you. So for those of you that are not familiar with SiriusXM, we provide some of your best audio content, music, sports, podcasts, any and everything you can think of to keep you moving throughout your day. And from a DE&I perspective, we support that because we want to make sure that the employees we have in our organization really reflect all of the diversity of voices, perspectives that you all have come accustomed to love about the content that we offer. And so the question around what has excited me in the last few years, it really is about our employees and the community that they've built. We have employee resource groups, as many of you I'm sure also do. We call ours communities, and that is intentional because they are there to support one another. The mass amount of connection that employees have been able to build has been amazing. I think back 3 years ago, right, when we had the murder of George Floyd, and all companies were trying to do something amazing in the DE&I space. Whether that was, building communities that allowed people to connect, giving money to organizations that support DE&I. The one thing that has been sustainable, and there's a big question around what companies are doing around that money they put to the side, but the one thing that has been sustainable is the connection of employees. So I think community building with employees has been the best progress in the last 3 years.
Okay, great.
Yes.
You want to keep going with that, Tara?
Yes, absolutely. So I am Cara Bellevue. I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Access Strategy for NAF, which is an educational nonprofit. We're servicing over 112,000 students across the United States. And unlike Sirius, we are not very well known, but we have, I'm taking you back to your high school days and think about all the things that you had aspirations around and realizing the wonderful world of life and what you could have accomplished. And seeing these young people today, we see that they're able to accomplish so much. So as we've made progress in the last few years, my role became official within our organization in 2021. And we have been focusing on the internal and the external aspect. And for us, it really is about how leaders can create psychological safety. So creating that environment for us to be able to have these courageous conversations, as well as making sure that these are brave spaces. And what does that mean in terms of indicators and behaviors? So really excited for how we are going to continue this work and making sure that we're shepherding this early on as opposed to later and then trying to do the correction that we are oftentimes placed in.
Great, that sounds wonderful. Oh, sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
Hi, I'm Heather Tinsley-Fix, and I'm a Senior Advisor of Employer Engagement at AARP, and I talked about that a little bit earlier today. AARP's mission is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. So that's where my work comes in, because part of that involves working. But at any rate, I did want to also emphasize that we really feel that all ages bring something to the table. And I think that the most important thing, or the most interesting thing about the last 3 years, has just been the switch from DEI being a good thing to do and it makes you look good. It's now really just an imperative. And I feel like that is kind of what we're talking about, is how do you sustain that? It's I just remember doing this work 8 years ago when it was not the same feeling. And now it's like, this is table stakes, you have to do it.
Yeah, it's so true. That is very true. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, just wanted to make sure because they were having trouble with my mic. My name is Cara Zibbell. I am the Vice President of People and Engagement at Atrium. I go by pronouns she, her. At Atrium, we are a WeBank certified woman-owned company who really provide leading talent solutions and extended workforce management solutions. We have a diverse portfolio of clients from your very small company to some of the leading brands. We employ about 25,000 or so W-2s each year, and we try to provide those particular associates or temporary workers with the same value proposition that we like to treat our internal employees with. So we have two groups of people that we really, really are serving. I think for Atrium, one of the most significant changes that we've undergone in the last couple of years is really taking a hard look in the mirror at who we are, challenging the social norms that were created parallel to our brand. As we grew up, our brand grew up. And so some of those social norms were positive and others really needed to be examined. And so we really took a hard look at ourselves as an organization and what we stood for in our mission and our value proposition. And you can't sugarcoat that, right? It's like when you go to the doctor for an annual physical and the doctor turns around and says, "How's your diet?" And you go, "Well, I had a salad yesterday, so yeah, it's good." Meantime, the night before I ate a whole box of Peeps. But my point is, I think as an organization, we really had to look in the mirror and not lie to ourselves, not be untruthful to ourselves. We had to look authentically and look at all those wrinkles in our character and decide which of those we wanted to maintain as part of our identity and which of those needed to be enhanced and really examined and changed.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Alicia Williams, Vice President and Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Saks. Whether you are in New York, tourists, et cetera, everyone knows the iconic Saks Fifth Avenue on Fifth Avenue. If you don't know it, you should visit it. But Saks, the side of Saks where I actually oversee DEI for is the luxury e-commerce platform side, the digital side of the business. Maybe about a year and a half or so ago, the stores and the digital side became a separate entity. So we have our Saks.com features and wonderful platform and marketplace there. We still have the arm extension to our wonderful stores where you can go, feel, touch. But whatever you can't find there, I still, shameless plug, Saks.com, it is, who I am so lovingly promoting. In terms of DEI, I think the progress, two folds come to mind. One being my past life. I was in higher education doing diversity work prior to 2020. And then DEI was more programmatic. It was, what events are you having? Does everyone feel happy and good to be here? And now it's becoming more systematic, where a lot of practitioners are in rooms making changes that I don't think we were in prior to 2020. I think personally for my organization working in luxury, a big thing is demystifying who luxury appears to be for. Luxury is built off of exclusivity. And I think over time, what we are seeing is the customers and consumers are changing. The face of luxury is changing. And at Saks, we've just done a great job over time recognizing that, not being tone deaf to that, and really making sure that we're doing justice so that everyone, consumers, partners, investors, employees can say, I feel welcome, I feel included, I feel like I belong.
That's great. It's so interesting to hear you all talk about the momentum that's happened in the last 3 years. And, some roles were originated and there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement after Floyd about the opportunity for diversity and inclusion across the spectrum, from corporations to foundations and other organizations. Now that we've had 3 years to sort of think about what's been happening and what we want to invest in, just what do you think is the biggest obstacle? So it's the flip side of that first question. There's a lot of hope that started out and, out of a real tragedy. So what do you think, what's standing in our way now?
I don't mind taking that. So I do think that for us particularly, we're a smaller organization. I think trying to bring the fabric, the new ethos of diversity and inclusion into your organization and having it truly felt by all levels, including your executive and C-suite, has been the most challenging piece for us. And while there is certainly agreement in theory, I think it's harder to practice, particularly since much of our executive and C-suite team grew up in Welshism, which was all for capitalism, right? It was capital first and people second. And so how do you reverse that? And how do you make that instinctual instead of, oh yeah, I was trained on that and now I need to put it into action. It should be the way you breathe and the way you go about your day. And so I think for us, that's been very, very challenging, is bridging that gap. Thankfully, I have an amazing DE&I team, and they have challenged our executives to go through things like privilege exercises, walking through and trying to define what kind of privilege you have that brought you to the place that you're currently at, trying to determine what characteristics have brought you to that place, and then how do you contribute positively? How do you become an ally then to give somebody who perhaps may not have those same privileges, give them that step ladder to then share their perspective and their voice. So I'm hoping that we're taking that challenge on with some muscle, and we are trying to work at it one day at a time, both in consistency in the mission, in the messaging, and in the action.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let me jump a little bit on that as well and talk about it from a macro perspective. So I started off saying one of the most exciting things for me has been employees and community. One of the things that I talk a lot about with my peers is sort of what we're seeing as this waning interest in DE&I. So we think about these, uncertain times. A lot of companies are buckling down, pulling things back, and DE&I often gets the brunt end of that. I have colleagues that have been laid off from jobs. I have colleagues that their entire team has been wiped out, and DE&I budgets are being slashed because folks are focusing on other things. So I think the biggest obstacle are all of those things that get in the way. When people think about, I gotta figure out what my business strategy is, they're not often thinking about how DE&I can drive that. And so they go into production mode, result mode, we gotta get things done, and leave the DE&I conversation off the table. And so 3 years post George Floyd, I'm seeing it wane, and it's scary. It's scary because many of us have put our heart, soul into what we think our company should be doing. And I'm not suggesting that companies are not still interested, but I'm suggesting that there are business challenges getting in the way, and folks have not quite made that connection to understand that DE&I can drive the company doing better. DE&I can drive innovation. DE&I can drive the company performing better. And when things go a little wiry, then folks forget that and they go in as business as usual. Mm-hmm. And so it's top of mind for us. We have to keep it top of mind for our business partners as well to let them know this does not go away. Mm-hmm. This is a long journey. There is no stops and starts. We have to be in it, we have to be in the game, and we have to stay committed to the efforts no matter what is happening outside. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, because what Nicole and Cara have shared is, how politicized everything has become, especially in the educational space, because that is the land that I kind of drive in, and a national education space. So it's so politicized, highly politicized, that it kind of takes away from the meaning of and why we're trying to do it. So if we're looking at our constituents, our customers, and who we are serving, to how Alicia referenced around who is actually buying the products. If we keep that in mind, that drives how successful our business is. And if we're understanding what we're producing and why we're producing it, that helps us with our how we're producing and being able to ultimately support our profits and sustain our communities.
Anyone else want to fight or?
The only thing I'll add to what Nicole said, and I think it's really important, is, diversity and inclusion, isn't a micro vertical, right? And I think that's what we've all learned here today. From day one, has done a great job of showing us that this is about employee engagement, and DE&I is one of the pillars of that employee engagement. And if we look at it at a more macro level, while I don't suggest that we shouldn't still have the concentration and focus within those pillars, I think we all stand to achieve both goals, people goals and profit goals. And I think we need to marry the two and run them parallel. So I think by reframing DE&I, and not losing, like I said, its potency, but reframing it to be engagement, I think I would personally have a better chance at success within my own organization in trying to navigate these waters that we have ahead of us.
I love that about getting the business to talk about it. And so I like to say that those of us that do this work have to get out of the way, right? It's not about us. It's about the company. It's about all employees in the company, and we need to get out of the way and let them do the work. And so a lot of us, many of us that have been working for years and years, we have egos because we think we're all of that, and we do good work. But at the end of the day, if I leave any organization and the organization thinks that DE&I is gone away because I left, I have not done my job. My job is to make sure that it's infused in the organization, so no matter who is there, if I'm gone, if somebody else comes in, that the work continues. And so it's so important that we get out of the way and allow the organization to do what it needs to do with our help, because they really probably can't do it by themselves. But, right, we can't drive everything. And folks get upset because I'm like, no, I can help you. I need you to do it. What toe are you putting in the game so that you make sure you own it and people see that from you?
And I want to let you get to the next question. One small consideration, just to take a different approach, which has become a big obstacle in DEI, is now that more diversity segments are being uplifted, we've seen more of this oppression Olympics, as a lot of practitioners say happen, where as practitioners, you may have data that tells you where certain gaps are that you're trying to address, and then you may have others who are saying, what about me, what about me? And I think we're forgetting that when you, let's say, move racial equity, you're still moving equity for those in the LGBTQ plus community, for those who are women, for those who are, identify as being disabled, whatever segments you could identify with. I think as more diversity segments are saying, hey, I'm marginalized, which is great, I think sometimes we forget allyship applies to all of us. And a lot of practitioners are finding themselves in this place of where's the house burning that I need to kind of tend to? And then you become in this place of they're fighting each other, and then the macro things that are happening are kind of slipping underneath the rug while those groups tackle and fight each other. And that rise is definitely a huge obstacle. So it's macro and micro, so just wanted to throw that in there to go along with that.
That's such a good point. And a few of you mentioned this, that this is, you have to think about your priorities and be strategic in some ways. And so that's one way of figuring out where do we start? There's so much work to possibly do. And, tying DEI work to the bottom line, which is something you all have mentioned, and it totally makes sense. You have a specific market that, your company is trying to grow. Like, why wouldn't they have a more inclusive workplace that allows the work product to appeal to a broader set of people? And now, though, that we're in an environment with some economic headwinds, as you mentioned, people are questioning, the investments that they've made. They might be a little hesitant to invest more. So what do you think people should do in this moment to advance the work, as companies are saying and as institutions are saying? I can't tell what the impact is necessarily. I'm going to revert to my old habits. You were mentioning that we've had this long history of working a very specific way, and if you've sort of started to change practices within 3 years, if you've already done things another way 20 years, it's hard not to revert. So what do you think that companies and institutions should be doing, and you all would like to do as we face economic headwinds to advance the work?
I can kind of take that or start off. I think one thing to note, so I'm a career changer. Like I said, I did DEI in higher education, and then I've done recruiting and DEI on Wall Street before Saks. And the economic climate is affecting every industry, everyone. So I think one thing to note is I think every DEI practitioner across different industries and spaces are probably dealing with the same kind of difficulties when it comes to priorities of your organization, changing, shifting, budgets, et cetera. This may sound cheesy, but I am an acronym person. It helps me remember. But one way that we try to push it on my team is we say, we go in all caps mode. And so CAP is, the C is collaboration, the A is asking, the S, I can't spell, the P is prioritizing, and the S is strategizing. And so when your budgets are tighter or smaller, you go into all caps mode, meaning, okay, one, who can I collaborate with? So maybe it's part their money, part my money. Maybe we're, putting money into the pot. Does this touch recruiting? Does this touch charitable giving? It doesn't always have to come out of your budget. The asking is sometimes it's asking, straight up, hey, I need more money here. This is priority. Hey, can we shift this, change this? Or asking for other adjustments that would help you carry out what you need to. The prioritizing P is having a very realistic conversation with yourself on, we want to do all of these things this year, but what are the priorities? Because in DEI, you can get lost in feeling like you need to do everything, but some things will really move the needle more than others. And then the S, strategizing, is being clever. What things can you maybe take in-house and not use a vendor? Or is there a vendor who maybe can check off a couple of boxes? Maybe you don't need the entire e-learning suite and you can pick a couple of courses that you need. So it's strategizing and seeing how can you get creative with the resources that you have, because regardless of how frustrating it may be, if you're really in this work for the meaning, you'll still do what you can for those on the other end.
I think I'm going to say something that's pretty obvious, but data is always, using data to connect the impact of DEI to business outcomes is really important. And I'm sure that there are, lots of studies. The one that comes to mind because of the work I do is that the Mercer Workforce Institute put out a study at the end of last year showing that tenure is directly correlated to business success. In other words, the longer your employees stay with you, the greater your KPIs perform. And that there's two implications that I take from that. One is that age and tenure often go together, right? So experience does in fact matter. But the other thing is permanent, or employees who are employees rather than just consultants or gig workers, right? Bringing people into your organization as employees and keeping them there has a real impact on your bottom line. So I would say data, and then the other thing I would say is, you have to create a space for difficult conversations. I think that is the hardest thing to do. We've talked about that in AARP's DEI group, which is, you're not gonna change hearts and minds, and you're not gonna get too far forward with just checking the box with programs. You have to have the tough conversations, and I think, frankly, age is probably lower on the priority list for those difficult conversations. It should be there, but there are other areas where you have to be really brave and talk about, what is the impact to you as my team member or you as my colleague in another team.
And I'll add to that, because I think that data also gives us the opportunity to say what's not working. Sometimes we kind of keep doing things just because it's easier, it's the low-hanging fruit, but sometimes you have to have those courageous conversations and to be candid with compassion. So it's not working. Why is it not working? Asking the questions, doing those engagement surveys, doing those pulse checks to make sure that happens, and just going to make sure that when I use all caps, I'll be giving you credit because I will be using it. Okay? Exactly.
The t-shirt.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
can borrow that as well.
I appreciate that. I like the credit. Yeah.
Okay.
well deserved. I do think also as budgets get tighter and resources start to get shaved, whether that be in the DE&I space or any other space, I think we really have to look at the assets we've already invested in. and that is our employees, right? They are diversity, equity, inclusion, right? We need to bring them, we need to invest in them. I wear this t-shirt often, I don't know, I have a bunch of t-shirts, but they all say kindness is something or other, but the one I love is kindness is free. And I think what we can do, regardless of how strapped we are, regardless of how many resources we're down, is to really promote authentic interest in our employees, try to meet them halfway, meet them at their level and say, what do you need? What do you need to be successful, whether that's something in your environment, whether that's a feeling of inclusion, or an emphasis on, age appropriate, activities or moments. Meet your employees at where they are in their lifestyle. And I've learned that today. And so I'm thankful to all of you and this panel for really giving me that perspective, that no matter what resources go away from my budget, teaching that kindness and that genuine authenticity and that interest and that empathy is free. I've already invested in you. I give it to you, you give it back to me.
Thank you. I feel like you
I like
gave me something.
We're good.
Yeah. You're touching on this sort of being genuine and also sort of listening, and as I think someone else mentioned pulse checks as a way to sort of check and see if the strategies and resources that are being invested are working. What do you find particularly useful in that respect? If you want to have it be something formal rather than sort of informal conversations, what are some useful tools?
So I'll start. I think formal, of course, are engagement surveys, listening circles. You can make those formal and have informal conversations within a structure. I think those are helpful. I also want to say, though, that the formal and the informal go hand in hand, right? Because not every formal structure that you set up will get you the information you might want or need. And so those informal conversations are critically important. And so I find, particularly with the DE&I teams, we are often in a position where people want to talk to us, right? And so we get everybody reaching out, wanting to have conversation, and that's data for us, right? And so we have to be careful about how we carry that back. But you hear enough of it to say there's a trend and there's something going on that we need to figure out. And so I just want to make sure that we understand that the formal and informal are both really important, and that really requires us to meet people where they are. So some people will respond very well to formal structure, and others won't. And so if you figure out the way to meet people where they are and listen to what everybody up here talked about, you're golden. You're going to get these nuggets that will help you propel your efforts forward. And I always say that we should listen with curiosity and not listen to solve. Leaders often get in their own head, and an employee shares something, and they're like, I can tell you how to fix it. Let me help you figure it out. And most times they just want you to listen. So if we listen to learn or listen with curiosity, we set ourselves up to get that data, formal and informal, that will help us figure out directionally where we may need to go. And so listening is a skill set that most people think everybody can do that, but that is not the truth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not the truth.
No, because so much of the time when you're listening, you're actually thinking, what does this mean about me?
Exactly.
Not,
exactly.
what are you telling me?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
the Neuro Center for Leadership just released a study in 2022. I was listening to a podcast over the weekend, and one of the things they were stating was that 70% of executives, senior leaders, really have a fear of showing empathy, because to them it translates to weakness. And how do we bridge that gap? And one of the things they were saying is, listening is not just tuning in, and listening, to your point, Nicole, is not just taking the information and then placing yourself in their shoes. It's stopping and saying, no, I can't assume that I know what it feels like to be in your shoes. I have to stop, and I have to ask questions, and I have to investigate so that I have an understanding, truly, authentically listening to you and understanding what you are. It gives leaders almost a false sense of confidence when they say, oh yeah, I talked to George, and I tried to really imagine what it was like to be in George's shoes. George feels that, he's experiencing microaggressions or what have you. Well, did you ask George how that truly felt, how it was impacting his day-to-day work? And so I think that listening is more about, to your point, that curiosity, taking it that step further, not just sitting there and using your ear, but using your voice.
I mean, as you all mentioned, it's something it's a skill, it's a talent, and not everyone has sort of the innate ability to have conversations about these topics. How do you think can people be trained to speak and listen better and engage better? And if so, how? What's a good way of doing that?
Mm-hmm. I would say yes, you can, but it starts with, as I talked about earlier, is that creating the environment and the space. And so what we utilize is around brave spaces. And so one, inviting people into the space to have it be considered a brave space, but also two, in terms of like training, is being able to model the behavior, not just tell someone to do something, but how do you model it? What do you consider to be the behaviors that need to be included in being able to have that conversation? And so as you create those opportunities, from our ERG meetings that we talked about to our all staff, how do we start those with that this is a brave space, this is where we're listening, this is where we're learning, this is where we're sharing, and allowing for that to be consistent and giving opportunities for that to happen not just once, but on a regular basis.
Absolutely. You know, conversations, we talked a lot about conversations and listening. So I do think that leaders can be trained. However, with anything that you learn, it takes time to get it right. And so I ask leaders to give themselves grace, to give themselves the permission to go into something that's uncomfortable. So 2-3 years ago, when I first joined SiriusXM, we really forced leaders into these conversations about race. Now, I had just got there. I know they were like, she has lost her mind. Who brought this lady here? But it was important for me to say that as leaders, you have to model the way. You have to put yourselves in situations where you have real, authentic conversations. Now, I'm gonna give you the guide, I'm gonna give you the structure to do that, but I need you to show up authentically as yourself. I need you to listen, again, not listen to solve, but listen out of curiosity. And I need you to have some skin in the game. And so you think about your own diversity journey, and I challenge all of my leaders. You have a diversity journey. You may not be a Black woman like I am. You may not be whatever the ... is, but you have a story. And I have them tap into those stories so they can enter these conversations in a way that's authentic, enter these conversations in a way that's give and take. So yes, if an employee wants you to listen, absolutely listen. If an employee is opening up to have conversation, then you need to be prepared to have that conversation. And so what tools can we give you? What tips can we give you to get you prepared? But ultimately, you have to give yourself grace because it will be uncomfortable and it's okay. Employees would probably rather see you squirm a little bit and say, you know what, I just don't get it, I don't know, than to pretend that you have all the answers. So it's that authentic showing up authentically that I think really helps guide in that dialogue in those conversations.
I think that was a good point about meeting people where they are on their journey. And so like right now, for instance, we're working on something called an allyship journey. I know some are trying to cancel the word allyship. I like it. It says what it is. But we're not trying to make it, we're trying to make it more practice-based. So it's supposed to be a series of courses and actual action items. So it may be a list and it might say, hey, have lunch with someone from a different, identity that you've never met. It may have a sponsorship one where, hey, recommend someone for a project who you have not worked with before. So those are things that we're creating because I've had a lot of people come to me that are like, on my team, they see me as the DEI police because I say something and I'm an ally, and then sometimes I'm told by the person I'm speaking for that I made them uncomfortable. And so I think a lot of times it's people from marginalized groups. We also don't give others grace who are trying to learn through this journey. So we're, as the DEI team, say, let us take that away and let's create this allyship journey. Let's have new training for managers on saying things like how to give feedback. Managers are afraid sometimes to give feedback to employees who are from different groups than them. Let's meet people where they are in their journey. Let's be okay if someone is just starting, realizing that DEI is a marathon. I know we want things to happen quickly, but it's not a sprint.
I like what you have both said about, everybody has their own story, because I feel like older people often get put into the, like, you've had your time, get out of the way, we're done with your approach, it's time to move on kind of thing. And I think you have to have a balance between, the perspectives of people with different levels of experience, but even the folks that, like, who are, say, the ... like older white men, they have something that they have to bring to the table and they have to say, but, you also have to have, that humility. So I do think it's important to recognize and that sort of explosion, I think, of all these different aspects and faces of diversity is important, but then it also makes it challenging.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think you and your work and your organization are a good example of this, of diversity along different dimensions. I think people usually hear that word and think about people of color, maybe women. They might go into LGBTQ+, but diversity across generation and other identities. How do these things apply to just a multi-generational workforce? Is it same strategy?
Well, I think that I would say two things. One, intersectionality. So, we had a conversation about caregiving just prior to this. 25% of caregivers are millennials. So, it's like there's a lot of layering. Ageism hits women harder and earlier than men. Older LGBTQ folks may not be as open because when they were coming up, it was scary to be LGBTQ. So there's lots of layers and intersections in that. Age is the one spectrum that we all share and hopefully get a long way along, right? But then the other thing I would say too is that, age itself should be an aspect of DEI, and so insofar as that can be like acknowledged as its own thing, that's something that we hope to help you with our resources, and we think that's a really important thing as well. But it really is kind of about that intersectionality.
We're running short on time, so I actually have to I could. You guys have a lot of great insights. I'm going to start the speed round in which we take everything that you've said and just try to figure out, if we had to, prioritize, just redouble the focus over the next couple of years, what should HR leaders be doing? And I'll start on this end with you since we start. Yes, just want to mix it up.
I think that, so over the next few years, I think one is recognizing that DEI will continue to change and shift. It shifted, I think when I first started doing DEI, my team called it EDI, and then the acronyms may change again, what people value may change again. So being flexible and fluid in your approach, I think a lot of times as DEI practitioners, we forget to perfect our craft. So we too have to stay up to date on trends, how communities are impacted. Things that we're creating are like inclusive language libraries to keep our company up to date, like our marketing teams on, words and things not to say, because DEI should not just stay in-house in HR. It should extend to your marketing, for us, merchandising, to your finance. Their diversity, equity, inclusion should not be put in this box. It should not be sporadic where it pops up at holidays and heritage months. So I think it's this realization of, in the future, thinking about how will you restructure it for your organization so it's still relevant, and then two, making sure that you're not putting it in this box, and that the people that you hire, you're also willing to support their professional development, that they don't burn out, their well-being, so they can continue to show up for your organization and your workforce.
I'll add to that and just say, we need to continue to be resilient. Each of us should be giving ourselves a pat on the back. This is a rough journey, and people, like I said, are dynamic, fluid assets, and we try to get it down to a science, and the reality is it is fluid and it is ever changing. So to maintain that resilience and that fortitude, to keep up with consistency both in mission, messaging, and action.
I am going to yield my time because I want to hear from you guys. And there's
So very quickly, people first, and knowing and understanding that we are all human, and understanding that in that process, it's internal work and it's external work. It's not one or the other, it is both.
Absolutely, it is both. And I'll say that we should get out of the way. Everybody plays a role. I never have a leader leave a conversation with me without me giving them something to do. So if any leader ever says to me, I don't know, oh, I gotcha. I got a couple things that you can do. So we should always be prepared to give people the space to learn from themselves. But when they say, I don't know, be prepared to give them something. And so that way, people don't walk away with nothing to do. Everybody can get in this game. Everybody can get in this game.
All right, great. I'll let that be the final word. Thank you for this inspiring and insightful discussion.